The words hit me like a freight train. You're fired. Two simple words, but they felt like 1,000 knives. They came from the one person who had always been there, the one person I had worked for, lived for, and strived to make proud. My father. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in shallow, controlled gasps. I sat there, staring at him, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The office around me seemed to close in, the tall floor-to-ceiling windows showing a panoramic view of Manhattan that had once been a source of pride. Now it felt suffocating. I had always imagined this moment would come, but I never thought it would be like this. Never in my wildest dreams did I think my father would do this to me. Dad, if you just listened to me about the Henderson account, I started, trying to explain, to make him understand that my ideas had merit, but he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear that I had worked tirelessly to bring new ideas to the table, that I had tried to modernize the company, to adapt to the future. He didn't care. Mr. Matthews in this office? He interrupted coldly, his voice so sharp it felt like a slap across my face. His eyes, usually warm and reassuring, were now cold and distant, as if I was just another employee to him, someone who had failed. The Henderson account was the last straw, Alexandra. Your so-called innovative approach cost us a $12 million contract. I can't let this continue. You're fired. His words lingered in the air like a heavy fog that I couldn't escape. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, but nothing came out. I wanted to scream, to tell him how hard I had worked, how much I had sacrificed for this company, for him. But it wouldn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. I looked at him, sitting behind his desk, calm and composed as though firing his own daughter was just another business decision, as though he had no emotional connection to me. He was a man of tradition, of rules, of the old ways. And I was someone who had dared to question that. Someone who had tried to challenge the status quo. I had pushed too far, and now I was paying the price. I had been with Matthews & Sons for as long as I could remember. I started in the mailroom at the age of 16, working my way up through every department. I had spent years proving myself, showing my dedication to the family business. And yet, despite all that, I was still not enough. My father had always favored David. David, the golden child, the one who walked straight into a vice president position after business school without having to prove himself. Meanwhile, I had been slogging away for years, trying to show my father that I was capable, that I could lead, that I could take the company into the future. But it was never enough. I wasn't a son. And in my father's eyes, that made all the difference. Enough, my father said, cutting off my thoughts. He raised his hand as if to silence me. This isn't some startup playground where you can experiment with wild ideas. This is Matthews & Sons. We've built this company on tradition and proven methods for over 40 years, and I won't let you tear it down with your nonsense. His words cut deep. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to throw everything on the desk in front of him. But I couldn't. I had to stay calm, composed, the way I had been taught. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky as I adjusted my charcoal gray suit. It was the same suit I had worn to countless meetings where I had successfully brought in millions in new business that didn't matter now. I had thought that my success would finally earn me the respect I had always craved. But in the end, it didn't matter. I wasn't a son. I was just the daughter who didn't understand business. I was just a failure. You're making a mistake, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. But my father didn't even look up. He just turned his attention to the papers on his desk, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. Your severance package will be handled by HR. Please clear out your office by the end of the day. I turned to leave, my body moving on autopilot. As I reached the door, I paused. I glanced over my shoulder, feeling a lump form in my throat, but I forced myself to speak. Dad? His eyes flickered up briefly, irritation flashing across his face. Don't drag this out, Alexandra. It's over. I stepped out of the office, my heart heavy with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and sadness. The door clicked shut behind me, and I walked down the hallway, each step feeling like a funeral march. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, their gazes filled with pity and curiosity, but I couldn't look at any of them. I had been cast aside, and there was no going back. As I passed the desks of my coworkers, I kept my eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the whispers that followed me. Only one person dared to look me in the eye. Janet, my assistant for the past 5 years, met my gaze with an expression of sympathy and concern. I could see the question in her eyes, but she didn't ask. She simply followed me into my office. "Alex," she said softly, her voice filled with disbelief. "This isn't right. Everyone knows that the Henderson account was lost because David promised them impossible delivery dates. It wasn't your fault." I didn't respond. Instead, I started packing my things into a cardboard box. There were no words left. There was nothing I could say that would change anything. Janet continued to stand there, watching me as I took down the framed photo of my mother. She had passed away when I was 12, but her memory had always been my guiding light. She had always told me to keep fighting, to never let anyone dim my light. But now, I felt like that light was fading. "What will you do now?" Janet asked quietly. I carefully wrapped the photo of my mother in tissue paper, feeling the weight of her absence. But as I packed my things, a strange sense of calm began to wash over me. It was as if I had been given a second chance, a blank slate. For the first time, I realized that my father's rejection was not the end of my story. It was just the beginning. "I'm going to build something," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Something bigger than Matthews and Sons could ever be." Janet looked at me, her eyes lighting up with hope. "Need an executive assistant?" I smiled at her, really looking at her for the first time that day. Janet was more than just my assistant. She was smart, capable, and brilliant in ways my father would never see. "How about Chief Operations Officer instead?" I said. She blinked in surprise. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I replied, handing her my personal card, the one without the Matthews and Sons logo. "Call me tomorrow if you're interested. And Janet," I added with a wink, "don't tell anyone about this conversation." The elevator ride down to the lobby was surreal. 15 years of my life reduced to a cardboard box. I had given everything to this company, sacrificed relationships, worked weekends and holidays, brought in major accounts that had doubled our revenue, and yet none of it mattered. All because I wasn't a son. As I stepped out onto Fifth Avenue, the cold air hit me, but I didn't feel the chill. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I pulled it out. A text from David flashed across the screen. "Tough break, sis. But don't worry, I'll take good care of your clients. Maybe retail is more your speed." I didn't respond. Instead, I hailed a cab and gave the driver an address in Brooklyn. It was time to see the one person who had always believed in me. 20 minutes later, I was climbing the stairs to a modest brownstone. I knocked on the familiar red door, and it opened to reveal my grandmother, elegant as always, even at her age. "Alexandra," she said, her eyes narrowing as she took in my appearance and the cardboard box in my arms. "He didn't. He did." She ushered me inside, leading me straight to her cozy kitchen, where a pot of tea was already brewing. Grandma Rose had always known when I needed her. "Tell me everything," she said, setting out her best china teacups. So I did. I told her about the Henderson account, about David's impossible promises, about my father's cold dismissal of everything I tried to build. She listened intently, her bright blue eyes never leaving my face, absorbing every word. When I finished, she got up, walked to her study, and started shuffling through drawers. She returned with a thick manila envelope. "I've been waiting for this day," she said, sliding the envelope across the table. "Your mother knew it would come too. She made me promise to give you this when it did." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was another envelope, sealed with wax, and a folder filled with documents. I could hardly believe my eyes. "Grandma, this is your mother's inheritance?" I asked in disbelief. "Yes," she said. "Her family's shipping company, her real estate holdings, everything she built before she married your father. all in a trust for you." I stared at the documents in shock. The money wasn't as much as Matthews and Sons was worth, but it was more than enough to start something new, to build something of my own. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Your mother knew you needed to try it his way first," she said. "But he failed that test. Now, it's time for you to show them what you can do." I looked down at the papers again. This was it. My chance to finally do things my way. To build something that was truly mine. The days after I left Matthews and Sons were a blur. I didn't know where to begin or what to do next. I had been fired, rejected by the only family I had ever known, and my whole identity felt like it was crumbling. But deep down, I knew something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just the loss of a job. It was the realization that I had been suffocated by my father's outdated vision, held back by the walls of tradition that had been built around me for decades. I knew I couldn't return to the life I had left behind. I couldn't keep pretending that I was content with the role I had been given, the role that had been dictated to me because I wasn't a son. That realization hit me hard, but it also lit a fire inside of me. I wasn't just walking away from Matthews and Sons. I was walking toward something new, something entirely my own. I had been given a second chance, a blank slate, and I was going to use it. The first step was clear. I needed to build something of my own, something that wasn't limited by the old rules of my family's company. I wasn't going to be shackled by tradition anymore. But starting from scratch wasn't easy. It felt like I had to prove myself all over again, not just to others, but to myself. I had spent so many years working in the shadows of Matthews and Sons, trying to gain approval, trying to show that my ideas were worthy of being heard. Now, I had to build something entirely new, something that didn't rely on my father's legacy. I started by gathering a team, people who were as hungry for change as I was. Janet, my loyal assistant, was the first to join me. She had always been more than just an assistant to me. She was sharp, intelligent, and capable of so much more than the role she had been relegated to. I had always admired her dedication, and now, as I looked at her, I knew she was the one who could help me bring this vision to life. I didn't hesitate for a second. "How about Chief Operations Officer instead?" I had said to her. Her eyes had widened in surprise, but I could see the spark of excitement in her expression. She had been waiting for an opportunity like this. Janet wasn't the only one. As I reached out to former colleagues, those who had been overlooked, those who had been stifled by the old boys club mentality at Matthews and Sons, I found a team of passionate, talented individuals who were ready to build something new, something that would revolutionize the business world. We called our new company Nova Enterprises. It was a nod to the future, a reflection of what we were trying to create. Nova meant new, and that's exactly what we were doing. Creating something new, something innovative, something that would change the way businesses operated. We weren't going to be weighed down by the past. We were going to forge our own path. The first few months were a whirlwind. We had no office, no established brand, and no reputation. But we had something better. Vision. We had an idea of what we wanted to build, and we had the determination to make it happen. The initial steps were the hardest. We were working out of a small rented space, scrapping together whatever we could to keep the lights on. But every challenge we faced, every obstacle that got in our way, only fueled our resolve. We didn't have the luxury of a prestigious family name or years of established business practices. We had to make it on our own. At first, it was just small wins. Gaining small clients, getting our first major contract, getting the word out that we were here and ready to change the game. But with each success, we gained momentum. Our reputation began to grow. More clients came to us, eager for the kind of innovation we were offering. We weren't just offering business solutions. We were offering something that Matthews and Sons had never been able to, a new way of doing things. The turning point came when we secured the Henderson account. It had been one of Matthews and Sons' most valuable clients, and they had lost it because of their refusal to adapt. The Henderson Group was looking for something different, something modern, something forward-thinking, and that's exactly what we offered them. We didn't just pitch a service, we pitched a vision. We showed them how we could transform their business, how we could bring them into the future. And they saw it. They saw what we saw. They signed the deal, and Nova Enterprises had officially arrived. Securing the Henderson account was a victory, not just for the company, but for me personally. It was the moment when I realized that everything I had fought for, everything I had sacrificed, was worth it. I wasn't just a failure, I was a force to be reckoned with. And this was just the beginning. But success didn't come without its challenges. I had left Matthews and Sons behind, but that didn't mean the past was going to stay in the past. There were still people who doubted me, still people who saw me as nothing more than the daughter who couldn't fit into her father's world. I knew that the path I was walking would not be an easy one, but I was ready for it. I had been pushed down before, and now I was determined to rise. As Nova grew, so did my confidence. We hired more people, expanded our reach, and built a company that was everything Matthews and Sons had never been. A company that embraced change, that embraced innovation, and that wasn't afraid to take risks. We weren't just trying to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. We were leading that change. We were showing the business world that there was more than one way to succeed. Still, even with all the success, there was something that nagged at me. Matthews and Sons. My father. I couldn't escape the feeling that there was unfinished business between us. I had built something, yes, but I had also left something behind. The relationship with my father had been fractured, and despite everything I had accomplished, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a part of me that still wanted his approval. Then, one day, I got a call. It was from David, my brother. "Tough break, sis, but don't worry, I'll take good care of your clients," he texted, his words dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe retail is more your speed." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had built my own success, my own company, and I didn't need to prove anything to him. Or to my father. But that didn't mean I was ready to walk away from Matthews and Sons entirely. I had done something they couldn't do. But now it was time to show them how we could work together, how I could offer them something they needed. I wasn't going to tear down my father's legacy. I was going to build something better. I was going to merge the past with the future, combining Matthews and Sons' decades of experience with the innovation that Nova had brought to life. It was a big decision, but I knew it was the right one. As I sat in my office, looking out over the city that had been my home for so many years, I realized that I had finally found my place in the world, not as my father's daughter, not as someone who had to prove herself to anyone, but as someone who had created something that was truly mine, a legacy of my own. And that was something no one could take away from me. The phone rang again. It was my father. He wanted to meet. My heart raced, and for the first time in months, I felt the familiar pull of emotion. I wasn't sure what he wanted, but I knew one thing for certain. I had built something that he could never take away. I never expected to hear from him again. After everything that had happened, the firing, the dismissal, the silent years of building Nova Enterprises from nothing, I assumed my relationship with my father had reached its breaking point. But then came that call. "Alexandra," his voice came through, raspy and hesitant. "I need to speak with you." I froze. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, to ignore him the same way he had ignored me for all these years. But something inside me stirred. A mix of anger, curiosity, and perhaps something deeper that I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. The part of me that still craved his approval, still hoped that he could see me for who I had become, rather than who I had been. "All right," I said, the word barely escaping my lips. We arranged to meet at a cafe in the city, a neutral ground that was neither my office nor his. I arrived early, the quiet hum of the city around me doing little to calm the restlessness in my chest. What could he possibly want now? Why, after everything? I had moved on from Matthews and Sons. I had built something that was my own, something I was proud of. But still, the looming presence of my father, his disappointment, his silence, the weight of everything unresolved, hung over me. When he finally walked in, it was as though time had caught up with him. The man who had once been larger than life, the towering figure of Matthews and Sons now looked smaller. His suit was wrinkled, his tie slightly askew, and his once sharp, confident demeanor was nowhere to be found. He looked defeated. "Alexandra," he said softly, his voice carrying a note of exhaustion that I hadn't heard before. He paused for a long moment, as if he was searching for the right words but couldn't find them. "I need your help. The company. It's on the verge of collapsing." I didn't respond immediately. I studied him, watching the man who had fired me, rejected me, and never once believed in the path I wanted to take. There was a flicker of regret in his eyes now, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I had worked too hard, come too far to just forgive him because he was asking for help. "You fired me, Dad. You made it clear that I wasn't cut out for this," I said, my words sharper than I intended. But I couldn't hold back. "So why should I help you now?" He looked down, his hands trembling slightly as he folded them together on the table. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was stubborn. I refused to see what you were trying to do. I thought the company could survive on tradition alone, but I was wrong. I was too proud, too blinded by the past." For a moment, I sat there in silence, letting his words sink in. Was this genuine? Or was this just another attempt to fix what he had broken, to save face and keep control? He had always been the man who thought he knew best, who refused to acknowledge anyone else's ideas, even if they were right. "The board," he continued, his voice shaky now. "They're talking about filing for bankruptcy. Matthews and Sons could be finished. We've lost so many clients. Clients we could have kept if I had listened to you. But it's too late now. I need your help, Alexandra. We need Nova's approach. We need innovation, and I need you to help save the company." The weight of his words settled in the space between us, and for a moment, I felt the tension in my body melt away. This was it. The moment I had secretly hoped for, but didn't know if I could ever face. My father, the man who had dismissed me for so long, was finally acknowledging my value. He was finally admitting that I had been right all along. And yet, as much as I wanted to feel vindicated, there was still a part of me that couldn't let go of the years of resentment. "I built Nova from the ground up, Dad," I said, my voice softening despite myself. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. I had to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own terms without being in your shadow. But you didn't just reject me. You rejected everything I believed in. You rejected progress. You rejected the future." He flinched at my words, but he didn't look away. "I know," he said quietly, "and I regret it. I'm sorry, Alexandra. I see now that you were only trying to make us better. And I was too stubborn to see it. I was too proud to change. But I can't do this alone anymore. I need your help, and Matthews and Sons needs you." I took a deep breath, my thoughts racing. Could I do it? Could I go back and help save the company that had hurt me so much? Or was this just another chance for my father to assert his control, to force me back into a role I had already outgrown? I thought about everything I had accomplished with Nova. The clients we had brought in, the successes we had achieved, and the way I had finally found my place in the world, without him, without his expectations. But then there was also the legacy of Matthews and Sons, the history, the employees who depended on it. And despite everything, there was still a part of me that couldn't bear to see it all fall apart. "Why should I help you, Dad?" I asked again, this time quieter, almost as if I was asking myself. "Why should I help Matthews and Sons?" He looked at me with eyes full of regret, of something deeper than just a plea for help. "Because," he said, his voice steadying, "I see now that the future is not about maintaining what we've done. It's about evolving. You've built something incredible with Nova, Alexandra, and I was too blinded by my own pride to see it. But I know now, the only way we survive is by evolving, by merging the past with the future." It hit me then, the true meaning of what he was asking. He wasn't just asking for my help to save the company. He was asking for a partnership, for a way to bring together everything he had built and everything I had created. He was asking me to show him how to bridge the gap between tradition and innovation. And it wasn't just about saving Matthews and Sons. It was about transforming it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the decision settle in. My father had always been a man of tradition, a man who clung to the past because he feared the unknown. But now, he was acknowledging that the future was inevitable and that it could no longer be ignored. And if I could help him see that, maybe, just maybe, we could build something even greater than Matthews and Sons had ever been. "I'll help you," I said, my voice firm and steady. "But this has to be different. You can't just go back to the way things were. This isn't about saving Matthews and Sons. This is about evolving it. We're going to build something that's both innovative and rooted in the legacy you've created. But it's going to be my way." My father nodded, his face a mixture of relief and gratitude. He didn't argue. He knew I was right. And for the first time in years, I saw something in him that I hadn't seen before. Respect. He respected me. He respected my vision. And that meant more to me than I ever thought it would. "We'll do it together," he said, a note of finality in his voice. "Let's merge the best of both worlds, tradition and innovation. Let's build a future that honors what Matthews and Sons has achieved, but also embraces the future." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. This wasn't just about saving a company or proving a point. It was about healing, about finding a way to work together, to build something that was greater than either of us could create on our own. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges. But for the first time, I felt like we were both on the same page. We sat there for a while longer, talking about the future, about the merger, and about how we could combine Nova's cutting-edge technology with Matthews and Sons' established client base and reputation. As we spoke, I realized that this was more than just a business decision. It was a chance for me to finally reconcile the parts of my life that had always been in conflict. The merger wasn't just about business. It was about family. It was about bridging the divide between who we were and who we could become. It was about forgiveness of my father, of myself, and of the company that had once been my everything. And as I looked across the table at my father, I knew that we had finally found a way to move forward, together. As the days passed since my meeting with my father, I tried to keep my focus on the merger between Nova Enterprises and Matthews and Sons. There were meetings, planning sessions, and endless phone calls. Everything felt like it was finally coming together. But something in me, a nagging voice I couldn't shake, kept reminding me of how fragile everything was. A single mistake could derail the entire plan. One wrong move, and it could all come crashing down. It was a sunny Thursday morning when the unexpected happened. I was sitting in my office at Nova, going through some of the preliminary merger documents, when my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Janet, my chief operations officer and the person who had been with me since the very beginning. "Alex, you need to see this. Something's happening at Matthews and Sons. It's bad." My heart skipped a beat. I immediately dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice strained. "Alex, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think we've been set up." I froze. "Set up? What are you talking about?" "There's been a leak," Janet said, her voice full of disbelief. "Somehow, someone got access to the internal plans for the merger and has been feeding them to a competitor, Henderson Group. They've started moving in on Matthews and Sons' biggest clients, offering them better deals and using your merger plan as leverage." The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. How? How could this happen? "I don't know, but it's bad. We've been outbid on 2 major accounts already. They've already signed contracts with Matthews and Sons' most valuable clients. It's like they knew everything about our strategy, everything about the merger plan." My mind raced. This wasn't just a coincidence. Someone inside Matthews and Sons, someone who had access to the merger documents, was working against us. My first instinct was to think of the board members, the people who had been so resistant to change. But it wasn't just them. It couldn't have been. This was far more calculated, far more dangerous than any of them could have orchestrated on their own. I need to go there, I said, determination creeping into my voice. I'll handle this myself. Alex, be careful. You're walking into a storm, Janet warned, but I could hear the urgency in her voice. She knew that if this leak was as widespread as it seemed, we were facing more than just a business setback. Our entire plan was at risk. I didn't wait for another second. I grabbed my coat, stormed out of the office, and jumped into a cab, my mind spinning with the possibilities of who could be behind this. Had my father been involved somehow? Had he betrayed me again, trying to salvage Matthews and Sons in his own way? Was David in on this? Or worse, had someone close to me betrayed my trust for personal gain? The ride to Matthews and Sons felt like an eternity. My thoughts were racing, and the air outside seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. I had no idea who to trust anymore. My father had made it clear he was willing to change, but the idea that someone could use the merger plans against us, that someone I knew, someone I trusted, could be behind this, was unbearable. I arrived at Matthews and Sons headquarters and stormed through the revolving doors. The security guard barely glanced up as I entered, but I didn't care. I marched straight to the elevators and pressed the button for the top floor, where the executive offices were located. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped into the familiar hallway, the same hallway I had walked down so many times before. But now, it felt different. The air was thick with tension. I approached my father's office, my heart pounding in my chest. As I neared the door, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, sitting in the hallway, was one of the board members, the one who had been the most vocal in opposing the merger. I didn't have time to think about him. I pushed the door open and walked straight into my father's office. He looked up at me, startled. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something in his eyes, something like guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Alexandra, he said, standing up. What are you doing here? There's a leak, I said, my voice steady despite the anger burning inside me. Someone's been feeding Henderson Group our merger plan, and they're using it to steal clients. You know what this means? He took a step back, his face paling. What? How could that happen? Don't play dumb, I snapped. Who else could have access to those documents? Who else could have known the details of the merger strategy? I saw my father's eyes flicker, but he quickly masked it. I don't know, Alexandra, but we need to fix this. Fix this? How could he still be so calm, so detached, as if everything could just be swept under the rug? I knew he was hiding something. He had to be. He had always been so careful, so secretive about his dealings. But I couldn't get the truth out of him now. Where is the board? I need to speak with them, I demanded. They're in the conference room, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I stormed out of the office, making my way to the conference room. The board members were already gathered around the long table, their faces tense, their eyes avoiding mine. I knew the moment I stepped into that room, they would see me as a threat, as an obstacle to their control. But I didn't care. My company, my plans, were at risk, and I was going to make sure that whoever was behind this would be exposed. I know what's been happening, I said, my voice rising as I entered the room. Someone here has been leaking our plans to Henderson Group, and it's costing us everything. The room fell silent. No one spoke. I could feel the weight of their stares, the unease settling in. I need answers, I said, my tone unwavering. Now. That's when it happened. One of the board members, the one who had always been closest to my father, stood up slowly. His face was pale, his hands shaking. Alexandra, he began, his voice trembling. I never wanted you to find out this way, but it's too late now. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? He took a deep breath, and then, in a move that stunned everyone in the room, he slid a folder across the table toward me. I grabbed it and opened it. Inside was a contract, one that had been signed by my father, behind my back, just days before our merger meeting. It was a contract with Henderson Group, outlining terms that directly contradicted our plans. They had been planning this all along. My father had been working with them, feeding them our strategies, our plans. The merger was nothing more than a front. "Why?" I whispered, my throat tight. "Why would you do this?" My father stood up, his face a mixture of guilt and regret. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked out of the room, leaving me to face the devastation alone. I stood there, the weight of the betrayal crashing down on me. The man I had tried to save, the man who had promised me a chance to work together, had betrayed me. He had betrayed everything I had worked for. All the progress, all the dreams I had built were shattered in an instant. But this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something new. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. I wasn't going to let my father's mistakes destroy everything I had worked so hard for. I walked out of the conference room, my mind set. Nova Enterprises would rise from the ashes of this betrayal. I would rebuild it, stronger than ever. And as I stood in the hallway, facing the uncertain future ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I would not let this setback define me. It would only fuel me to go further. If you've enjoyed this story and want to see more of what happens next, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps me motivated to create more exciting, heart-pounding content just for you. Don't miss out on the next chapter in this journey. There's so much more to come.